So when we go to Antarctica, we are all equal. None of us and none of our countries own any of it. So we all turn up there. We're all individuals, and we are all equal in Antarctica. And I think that's a really good way to look at it, and I think it's really important that we also, with that right, comes a responsibility that we are all responsible for it as well. So that's me being a bit pious. Let's have a look at some of the human activities that do happen in Antarctica. And just very briefly, the two obvious ones are science and ship-supported tourism, which is what we are doing. Some of us may be doing science at the same time, I don't know. So those are the two commonest ways that humans go to sort of find a way of getting to Antarctica. Obviously there are other more niche activities like filmmaking, which I've been involved in with the BBC, and lots of other film crews go down there in a variety of ways. There's lots of challenges and expeditions, and sailing boats go down there, which again, I've done a bit of that. And also there are other sort of slightly more nefarious activities that we don't really want to happen, like illegal fishing. Now I won't talk about that now, but in my albatross talk I might mention it in passing. So let's have a look at the two most common activities. One is science, and this is a British base called Rothera with an airstrip, and they support science in the sort of middle of Antarctica. They fly in field camps, and people go and research ice and glaciology and geology and all the rest of it. If any of you have been watching Bowcam, you'll probably recognise this ship on the right. And that was taken last season, and when we get to Antarctica, if the weather is good and the captain is agreeable, we might be able to go out on the bows and you get a really nice view from there, from which to enjoy the scenery or look down at whales, or you never know what you're going to see there. So those are the two most sort of common activities in Antarctica. Less common is things like travelling to the South Pole. So you get people who go to the South Pole and you think that's what Antarctica is all about. But it's not. It's a very niche activity. That is actually at the South Pole. They have to move that pole every few years because the ice is moving. It's all sliding around. And so they keep moving the pole. They have to sort of geolocate it and say, oh no, it should be there. So, right, I'm at the South Pole. No, I'm at the South Pole. No, I'm at the South Pole. So that kind of thing. There is actually also an American base there called Scott Amundsen Base. So let's have a look at what the the environmental impact is of all these humans in Antarctica. There's one occasion when I noticed that when I photographed something which basically was the impact of both. This is the negative bit, and I don't want to emphasise it, but things do happen, and this was a vessel which was both carrying scientific support to a base, and it was also carrying tourism, so it actually covers both science and tourism. And they went aground just off a big penguin colony right next to Palmer Station down on the Antarctic Peninsula, and it wasn't a good idea. So we have to be very, very careful what we do when we get to Antarctica. Obviously, the ship this size, we are incredibly safety conscious. That's not going to happen this trip, believe me, but that was back in 1989, and since then things have changed, I think, possibly a little bit. So it just was a warning to the human race that we can't just go charging around anywhere, and we have to be very responsible. So the other thing I would say is it's not just the people who go there who have an influence on Antarctica. And that's why we do science down there, because in fact we all have an influence, and certainly through climate change currently we all influence what happens in Antarctica. Because, for example, this is a view of the Antarctica in winter with the ice surrounding it, and for years scientists, and this is the value of science, scientists have been measuring the extent of that sea ice. And here is a graph showing those measurements over the last many years, with the blue one at the bottom being the most recent. And you suddenly think, whoops, the Antarctic sea ice in winter has diminished dramatically in the last year. And that's a very, very serious kind of point. And I think Sarah is actually going to do a whole talk about the issues of climate change in Antarctica, and looking at it historically and from a variety of perspectives. So I'll sort of flag up that talk, and I think it's really important to know about these things. Another bit of research has been done recently by a multinational collaborative of scientists has been at the Thwaites Glacier, which is over here. and this is a glacier where they suddenly realised it was moving a lot faster than it was, and so they looked into why it was moving so fast, and they realised that well, normally what happens is you get this big thick ice shelf that comes down from the Antarctic continent, and it sort of hits the sea floor, and that slows it all down, and then gradually the ice floats out here, and then it breaks up and goes off to sea. If the water here warms up, what happens is it melts the underside of the glacier, and then this bit starts moving a lot faster. And the problem is, if you remove that bit, all the bit behind it starts moving faster, so you suddenly speed up the rate at which glaciers are going to move into the sea. So that's one area which scientists are exploring and looking at, and it's really important to know about these things. This is another area using satellite images to track the large chunks of ice that break off ice shelves. I mean, this is a natural process, but if it suddenly starts happening quicker than it has done in the past, then that will unlock some of these glaciers, and they can again start moving faster. That was A68, which turned up in 2017, and then we've had this one recently, A23A, which is currently there. We're probably not going to see it, actually. It's just heading off towards South Georgia, but it is at the north end of the Antarctic Peninsula, came out of the Weddell Sea and is heading that way. And that's about a third the size of Hawaii Big Island, about half the size of Cyprus, and about twice the size of Greater London. So this is a very large ice flow indeed. So that's all the sort of earth sciences that are going on, looking at all glaciological sciences that are going on. But the other thing that climate change does is it affects animal populations dramatically as well. And so it's really important to carry on research in animals to see, look at like penguin breeding and albatross breeding and all these kind of animals, because they are clues to what's happening in the wider environment. So don't forget biological sciences. And I use this picture because, again, it introduces a talk I might do later in the trip. That's actually me in 40 years ago, in 1982, actually 1983, on South Georgia, when we weighed some albatross chicks, and I'll do a whole talk about sort of science that we were doing and the relevance of it then and now. So, science, important, and but the most people who go to Antarctica are going down as tourists, and that's the sort of really big numbers these days. So it began to get so large that they started off an organisation called IATO, the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, and that basically is an overall body which looks after all, and all the ships who operate in Antarctica, including this one, run under IATO protocols. So we all obey the rules. IATO basically tries to make sure the environmental impact of certain sites isn't too great, and that we all work together and we all sort of avoid each other and make sure that you get a really good wilderness experience for everybody who goes down there, and that the numbers don't get too great. I mean, and it's a very, very good organisation. And for example, all the field staff who work down here, including the team who've been talking to you, we all have to do an exam to show that we know what we're talking about, and to know how to behave in Antarctica, to know what the IATA regulations are. And so it's a very well regulated business. This is just a graph. Doesn't matter about the details particularly, but that was the early days of Antarctic tourism in the mid-60s. That's the late 2017-18 season. There's about 40,000 tourists. This is just tourist numbers on the left. So it's got up to about 40,000 shipborne tourists, and then there's a few others there. So about 50,000. Tourists visiting Antarctica in 2017. The two latest seasons for which I have numbers, 2019-20 went up to 74,500. Then there was a dip obviously with COVID when everything went where it went. And then 2022-3 it was well over 100,000 tourists visit Antarctica. So it is getting, the numbers are quite big. But the really good bit about it is that when you go to Antarctica, you will be affected by it. You will find it exciting. You will, it gets you somewhere in here, and you will go home and you'll say, this is a really special place, and you will, I think it's really important to go, when you go there, you appreciate this, and you'll go home as a sort of ambassador for Antarctica, and that includes an ambassador for the sort of greater environment, really, and I think that's a really important thing to take home with you. I'll just whiz through a few more pictures. This is just nationalities that go there, the sort of proportion. A large numbers of Americans, Chinese, Australians, Brits, Germans, Canadians, and French people, and then 18% other nations, which I think nowadays includes a lot of people from South America as well, who are very interested in what's on their doorstep, which is fantastic. To sort of expand. I mean, there's probably about 50 nationalities on this ship, which is great. So let's have a look at what we might see in Antarctica.
50, yeah.
Very briefly at the end, just to kind of get you
50, 50, 505.
So this is
Brazil,
looking at from the
Argentina,
Norwegian Star
Portugal,
last year. As I said, the only
China,
visit
Canada, New Zealand, Australia.
maybe the Antarctic Peninsula. And I say maybe because, you know, once you leave Ushuaia and start heading across the Drake Passage, anything can happen, okay? So you just have to sometimes change plans. You're in a wild area where the conditions are very extreme on occasions, and if they're too extreme, you have to stop. You have to, initiate Plan B or C or D. So I just want to warn you that things might change. You might think, oh well, today we're going to go to so and so. Well, maybe not. We might go somewhere else. We'll always find somewhere, and it'll always be amazing, but it may not be exactly where you expect. So we first cross the Drake Passage. And occasionally, on occasion, as the first view of Antarctica, I've had this. Now, there is an island there, and you think, is that it? And, well, that's a place called Snow Island, and it's one of the less exciting visual areas of Antarctica. But as soon as it gets better, okay? And then if we get down the Antarctic Peninsula, it gets even better still. Oh, there we go. Nice day on the Antarctic Peninsula, and this is the area we're hoping to get to, if all goes well. If all goes well, okay? And you've got, in good weather it's incredibly beautiful. In bad weather, I think it's also incredibly beautiful. So don't worry if it looks a bit, the weather's rough. It's Antarctica, and I think I prefer Antarctica in. Well, no, I shouldn't say this. No, but it is exciting in bad weather, okay? But there's nothing like a nice sunny day. And the other problem is, this is, the Antarctic Peninsula, but as you can see, the sea is full of ice. And so it's really important to be aware of the ice and aware of how the ice works, and to also just not do anything stupid. So because of the ice, we've got, hang on a minute. We've got an ice pilot on board, okay? And he's a qualified captain in his own right, and he is working with the captain to make sure we just avoid any ice that might
Ice pilot ngộ hả?
The ice is good, photographically, because it's very beautiful. And once again, I would emphasise, if you are up late at night, this is late evening, summertime, it's just, I think the middle of the night in Antarctica is the most beautiful, because you get these incredible colours.
Tối nay coi không?
Was just,
12 giờ đêm.
11, half 11 at night, at the end of one trip, just heading off towards back. In fact, we were just about to head across the Drake Passage, and that turned
Giống
out
như
behind us,
Midnight
and we
Sun
thought,
mà mình coi ở ấy
don't
đó
want to
mà.
leave.
Hả?
The other
Ở
things,
Norway đó.
just very briefly, ice, we'll see quite a lot of ice, maybe not quite this close, but with it, we should see some glaciers, we should see some icebergs, possibly out at sea we might get big ones,
Cái này nè,
like
cái này
spectacular
trước mình thấy nè.
icebergs, and we might get smaller ones, which are more sort of pretty and, delicate. And we might, and we'll get reasonably close in. So we can, we'll see quite a lot. We might see a base. There's all mites here. We might see some albatrosses. There's albatrosses, Cape petrels.
Albatross thì kiểu gì, nhưng mà cái con squash là con gì?
We'll certainly see some wildlife.
Nhìn con nào cũng giống con
we
nào.
may see humpback whales that I showed you early on, but if we're very lucky, we might see orcas. Also, if we're very lucky and in the right place, we might see fin whales. Those are quite good possibilities, actually. And the fin whale's interesting because on the left-hand side of the jaw, there, I'm nearly finished, that is grey. On the right-hand side of the jaw, it's white. And that's a really distinctive, sort of defining thing of fin whales.
Humpback thì nhiều.
The other thing we might see, we might visit historic sites. It's just possible, if we get good weather, we might get towards Elephant Island, which is where Shackleton's men got stranded, and so there may be some sort of historical sort of context.
Cái ông mà cái group mà second form ổng stranded on Elephant hả?
And
Elephant Island hả?
I would say we're limited because the weather might limit us and we're on a big ship, so we have to be very, very careful. We will look after you, but we also want you to enjoy yourself and get the best experience, and I'm sure the captain, he's brilliant actually. This captain, we worked with him last year and he's fantastic, and I'm sure he'll do his best to get you to some extraordinary places. So I wish you the best, have a great journey and enjoy it. And if you want to talk more, see you in the gap after the door.
All right.
Thank you. Just one thing I would say, just take note of that. I think this is the first of our Antarctic headquarters sessions in the Bliss Lounge, 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. We'll have the whole team there, so you can ask us any sort of questions you want within reason. And so we'll either see you there or I'll be in Gatsby shortly. Thank you.